lives upstairs, so he may come down during the program. I just want to thank him and the staff again for opening up their magnificent home. We are grateful to Boston Mutual Life Insurance for sponsoring this morning's program. Many of you know that Boston Mutual has been providing life insurance in our region for over 130 years, and more importantly, the company is located in the Congressman's district in Canton. In particular, I want to recognize David Mitchell, Executive Vice President of External Affairs and Corporate Communications, who will introduce our guest in just a moment. It's been a very busy spring for the New England Council, and we have a few more great events planned for you in the coming weeks. Next Thursday, back here, Hampshire House, for a Capitol Hill breakfast with Congressman Bill Keating, which is May 4th. We're now just about 2 weeks away from our 2023 Washington Leaders Conference. I know many of you have already registered, but if there are a few people who have not registered, I would suggest that you might consider coming down to Washington, where we'll hear from members of Congress, members from the Senate, members from the administration, members from the media. 2 days of informative, interesting meetings and gatherings, and meeting some of your fellow members of the New England Council from all 6 New England states. We have over 200 of our neighbors and members already registered, so I think you'll enjoy it. Later in May, we look forward to events with Congresswoman Annie Custer, a special program here in Boston looking at the economic impact of climate change in the region, featuring the keynote remarks from Senator Ed Markey. As always, you can find more information, register for these events on our website, newenglandcouncil.com. Today, we're honored to welcome back a great friend of the New England Council, my neighbor, my congressman, and someone that needs no introduction, but he is going to be introduced by Mr. Mitchell. But needless to say, I've known Stephen Lynch for a long time, since he first got elected to the legislature as a state representative, and he's never changed. He's always stayed the course. Title didn't change him, Washington didn't change him. He just remembers where he came from, and every time he goes to vote, he thinks of the people in his district. He's an extraordinary individual, so needless to say, I'm very proud to have him as my neighbor, my friend, and our congressman. But for a formal introduction, I couldn't do it, so I'm going to ask Mr. Mitchell to provide the formal introduction.
Great. Jim, thank you for that. And I'd like to thank you and your staff, Larry and Griff, for helping us be a sponsor to this great event. I've come to a few of these. I actually attended one in the fall and heard the congressman speak down there, and was very actually touched and moved by his approach to Washington. Boston Mutual, as Jim said, was formed back in 1891, actually not too far from this location. We were founded to be a progressive life insurance company serving the working class of America. That was a quote from the founder, John Wheeler, from back then. As we look forward to today, we're still a progressive insurance company, very much dedicated to our customers, who are also our owners. Being a mutual company, your policyholders own you. And we focus on serving the working class men and women and their families of not just the Commonwealth anymore, but also the nation. We've grown from our roots up to a $1.8 billion company. We're very proud of that. We're proud of the footprint we have here in Massachusetts. A little known fact, we're actually the carrier of choice for over 90% of the towns and cities in Massachusetts. And we've had that in place for a very long time, and we're very proud, and we cherish those relationships. Something I was really impressed with when I heard the congressman speak back in the fall was, I think as Jim mentioned, he doesn't forget where he comes from. I come from a blue-collar background. I felt like he was speaking to me. He doesn't forget where he came from, always reflects on that, and helps that be the compass, your true north for how you act every day. So I won't get into all the accolades you've received over your career, Congressman. I know you're very important to your district and to the Commonwealth. I do have to say that And just in the few times we've met, I've definitely gotten the impression you're not a politician, but you're a true public servant. Congressman Lynch.
Thank you very much, David. I appreciate your kindness, your generous introduction, and thank you, Jim, as well. Let me just first begin by saying the vibe here at the New England Council is really a reflection of Jim Brett. And I think the success of this organization, it comes down to the simple fact that Jim Brett is such a welcoming soul. He invites discourse and debate. He understands not only the economic dimension of the work that you all do, but also the human side as well. I had the wonderful pleasure of serving with Jim in the state legislature. We were both members of the House of Representatives together. I remember when I first got elected, Jim had been there for 8 years, and I thought, wow, that guy's got a lot of time under his belt. We had 8 years, Jim, and I could not believe that you had served in the legislature. Now I've got, let's see, 22 years in the House and then 6 years in the state legislature. So I'm far beyond those few years that you had. But I do cherish them, and Jim hasn't changed either in many respects. It is really the hospitality and the welcoming nature of his spirit, I think. And, he's a man of faith, and I think that is reflected in all the work that he does. So, and we are very, very lucky to have Jim Brett in this position to help all of us, businesses and communities, do the most we can for the people that we represent. So I'm very glad to be here. My staff, also, I do want to acknowledge, we have some of our international partners here. I know the Consul General's office from Canada and Great Britain and Turkey and Japan are here this morning. So just want to say that we appreciate the wonderful, long-standing relationships we have, both on the diplomatic side and the commercial side with trade, and also the citizen-to-citizen relationships that we have with all those countries, and we cherish those relationships, and we're happy that they are part of the New England Council. So, as you know, so we've got a menu here, a lot of issues. We got a lot to talk about. We do. There's a lot going on. I'm going to have to neglect some things, but let me just start by saying I still serve on the National Security Subcommittee. So we've been scrambling this weekend to pull our personnel out of Sudan, out of Khartoum. Khartoum's a big city, very spread out. I haven't been in Sudan in several years, but Khartoum is probably between 5 and 6 million people, to the degree that we can actually get a good count on people. And we have about, the U.S., we probably have about 16,000 U.S. citizens. A lot of those 16,000 in Sudan are dual citizenship. So a lot of contractors as well. We advised everyone, we have been advising people to get out of Sudan for some time now. However, we've gotten very little uptake in terms of people actually obeying or agreeing to relocate. So I'd say we were able to pull out about 100 embassy personnel over the weekend, mostly yesterday on Sunday. We used an operation out of Djibouti, which is pretty far away. I mean, I've been to Djibouti numerous times, and people don't understand the space dimension in Africa. Everything is just huge distances. I remember people concerned about Ebola when it percolated in Western Africa, and I remember pointing out to someone that you know, Western Africa is the same distance as you know, from us as, I mean, it's just, you know, like from Boston to Frankfurt, Germany. That's basically the distance that, you know, it would have to travel. But anyway, the challenge we had was moving people. I know that the Marine Corps unit out of Djibouti used a couple of V-22 Ospreys and also some other helicopters to move 100 people out. There's still a lot of people left there, but they don't want to leave. And so now we're in sort of the situation we had in the Afghanistan withdrawal, where we had advised people we cannot force them to leave, but you know, talks are ongoing. It's not a good situation at all. There's no good side there. The two generals that are clashing, General Buhran was a former general under the old regime, under Bashir, and the other general actually was leader of a Janjaweed unit, militia unit, which was involved in some of the atrocities that occurred in Darfur. That was the last time I was there. So neither one has been receptive to ceasefire at this point. A lot of the fighting is happening right in Khartoum, so we're very, very concerned about civilian casualties, and the situation is very fluid right now. So again, we're trying to get as many U.S. personnel out and as many civilians out of harm's way as we possibly can, and that situation is ongoing. Ukraine, there's still the idea or the intent that there might be some type of spring offensive on the part of the Ukrainians, but I don't want to say too much more about that. As you know, the Republicans have taken over the House in the House of Representatives, and so now they are setting the agenda for what bills are taken up. And the dynamic is very, very different. So there's a difference of about 5 votes, right, between the Republican majority and us, the Democrats, in the minority. So it's a very difficult road for Speaker McCarthy because of the instability, I would say political instability, in his own caucus. So he's very unsure about the votes and the firmness of the positions of about 25 to 30 of his members. This insurgent caucus within his own party. So it's very difficult for him to put up bills because he does not know how his own members are going to vote, or whether he can rely on them to vote a certain way on a certain bill. It's very, very fluid there. So as a result, he's been relegated, I think, to choose messaging bills, if I could classify them as that. And it's not been good, I don't think, for the country nor for the House of Representatives. Some of the bills that have come up recently have been anti-LGBTQ legislation. In particular, the Republican leadership has focused on, there was a so-called Protection of Women and Girls in Sports Act, which would consider it a violation of Title IX for recipients of federal assistance to allow transgender girls or women to participate in girls or women's sports programs. So it also envisions, I don't think it's going to go anywhere in the Senate. I doubt it. But it would, just so you know what the thinking is over there, it would require, school officials to verify the genders of girl students who are seeking to engage in women's sports. And it puts those school officials in a very, very difficult position. I thought that I don't know if you read this, but there was a great editorial letter to the editor on the part of the governor of Utah, who's a Republican. And I thought he put it so well. I'm going to read part of it to you. It's about four pages, but I'm just going to read one little excerpt. And so he said, now, Utah is grappling with this as well. State legislatures across the country are all putting anti-trans legislation in place. But this section of his letter I thought was very important. He vetoed the bill, and it expected he'll be overridden. But he says, quote, "I must admit I'm not an expert on transgenderism. I struggle to understand so much of it, and the science is conflicting. When in doubt, however, I always try to err on the side of kindness, mercy, and compassion. I also try to get proximate, and I'm learning so much from our transgender community. They are great kids who face enormous struggles. But here are the numbers that have most impacted my decision to veto the bill. Those numbers are 75,000, 4, 1, 86, and 56. 75,000 is the number of high school kids who participate in high school sports in Utah. 4 is the number of transgender kids playing high school sports in Utah. 1 is the number of transgender students playing girls' sports. 86 is the number of trans youth reporting suicidality. And 56 is the percentage of trans youth that have attempted suicide. So 4 kids, and only one of them playing girls' sports. That's what all this is about. 4 kids who aren't dominating or winning trophies or taking scholarships. 4 kids who are just trying to find some friends and feel like they are part of something. 4 kids trying to get through each day. Rarely has so much fear and anger been directed to so few. I don't understand what they're going through or why they feel the way they do, but I want them to live. And all the research shows that even a little acceptance and connection can reduce suicidality significantly. So for that reason, as much as any other, I've decided to take this action, the veto, and hope that we can continue to work together and find a better way." That was his thoughts. And I agree with them in total, and I really, I sincerely regret that the Republican Congress has taken this direction, because there's so much other that we have to deal with. Leading me to this is a list of other things that we're trying to deal with. Principally, we've got to deal with this debt ceiling package, right? So this is not about new spending, and I understand the need to get our act in order fiscally, but this is for legislation that many of these Republicans have already voted for. They voted for this spending, and now they don't want to pay for the bills which they voted for. But the current debt ceiling is about $31 trillion, a little bit over $31 trillion. And Treasury has warned the federal government that it could reach D-Day, default day, when the federal government is no longer able to pay its bills as early as June 5th. So this week, Speaker McCarthy announced that the House Republicans are planning a vote on a 300-page bill that would pair debt limit increase with a series of favored spending cuts and energy-related policies. The Republican bill would raise the debt limit by $1.5 trillion or suspend the ceiling through March 2024, whichever comes first. And the Republican bill would cap fiscal year 2024 levels for discretionary spending at no more than 2022 spending levels per House appropriations. The Democratic staff indicate that this would require a cut of at least $142 billion or a 9% cut across the board from the fiscal year 2023 appropriation acts. So Republicans would also cap for the next decade, allowing only for 1% growth going forward. That is for the next 10 years. So the impact on Massachusetts here would be, according to the White House, A 22% cut for domestic programs would mean 42,000 fewer veteran outpatient visits at Massachusetts veterans hospitals. It would eliminate Pell Grants for about 1,500 students and reduce minimum award by nearly $1,000 for 100,000 students in Massachusetts. It would also strip food assistance for nearly 200,000 Massachusetts residents and eliminate 4,800 preschool and child care slots statewide, and deny about 1,200 state residents admission to opioid treatment programs, and cut about 140 rail safety inspections in Massachusetts. So that's sort of the picture of what that would do if we were required to deal with that. The Republican bill would also repeal a variety of green energy tax incentives included in the Inflation Reduction Act, including those that aim to cut greenhouse gas emissions and incentivize the use of electric vehicles. In the last Congress, I actually sponsored a bill that would have electrified the entire postal fleet, about 287,000 vehicles. So, and would also set up the infrastructure at our local postal facilities so that while the postal vehicles charge overnight, those charging stations would be available to the public for the duration of the day. The Republican bill would also repeal President Biden's actions to forgive student loan debt relief for millions of borrowers making under $125,000 per year. So that's what we're dealing with. And if you look at the contrast of what we were doing prior to this takeover, when you think about the Jobs and Infrastructure Act, $1.2 trillion. For New England, hugely important because we have some of the oldest infrastructure in the country, right? And it had been delayed for a certain amount of time, so it made those repairs much more urgent. And we also were able to put together a $280 billion CHIPS Act, CHIPS and Science Act, and reshore much of the computer chip manufacturing back to the United States instead of relying on Taiwan to bring that work home and that technology home. The bipartisan infrastructure law here at home has resulted in already, so it's a 5-year bill, but already it's brought $2.1 billion in Massachusetts for roads, bridges, and roadway safety and other major projects. $534 million was allocated to Massachusetts to improve public transportation options. We gave $1 billion directly to the T to deal with some of the problems they've been dealing with, and we've also put $92 million allocated to Massachusetts for climate change infrastructure resilience. So in my own district, I've been able to do seawalls in Hull, Weymouth, Quincy. We're looking at Hingham. I actually represent the coast from the north end neighborhood of Boston all the way down to Hingham. So we've already begun a $61 million project to rehab the north end U.S. Coast Guard station, which includes a huge climate change resiliency piece to protect that facility and the improvements that we're making there. So there are a lot of things I could go on and talk about. We've been able to do, we also reintroduced the idea of local priority projects. This allows members of Congress to identify projects that are urgent within their own community and steer funding directly to those projects. So this project was formerly known as earmarks, and now it's known as but we're going to trick everybody and call them priority projects. So yeah. So anyway, so my earmarks. Well, you know, this went sideways when we had that there was a bridge to nowhere in Alaska, and it all got taken down. But honestly, the way they have done it now is it has to come from the local community. It cannot be something that I think about and then say, okay, let's do that. We had disastrous consequences when members of Congress were just thinking up their own stuff. We had a teapot museum in Ohio that was run by a congressman's wife, and just some real abuses. So we needed to re-engineer this whole thing. So now we put out, so I represent 18 towns and 3 cities, and we asked those people, what are your priorities? Because it may be far different than what I would see from Washington, right? So some of the enacted projects that we're able to do, down in Braintree, $3.1 million for federal assistance on an area of that town that is right up against the river, and the Allen Street reconstruction project, the Brockton Neighborhood Health Center. We did $1 million to support a facility, and they've got a new mammogram operation there. Sue Joss, who does a great job down there. Home Base, which is run by General Jack Hammond, but in a partnership with Tom Werner and the Red Sox and the Mass General Hospital and Spalding Rehab. So not only does this project deal with veteran suicide and suicidality within that veterans population. And remember, we've had several million men and women in uniform who have done multiple trips to Afghanistan, multiple tours of duty to Afghanistan and to Iraq. And so as a result, we've seen about 65,000 veteran suicides since 2010. And so we've got to deal with that issue, because the number of those tours of duty over time have a corrosive effect on the psyche, and we really do need to address that in a meaningful way. This program not only deals with that, but also deals with men and women on the battlefield. So we can pull people out of Syria or out of Afghanistan or Mali or Somalia, and if their stress levels are high, we can put them right into this program, and then they do several weeks of rehab at the home-based program, and then we can put them right back on the battlefield. So DOD has taken a great interest in that, because they believe that it's worth its weight in gold, to be honest with you. So we were able to, with the help of Senator Markey and Senator Elizabeth Warren, get several $1 million for that program to continue their great work. City of Brockton, we have been working on a sludge biosolids sludge dryer to allow the city to disperse sewer sludge safely. BHA, Sonia Apartments, New England Aquarium, we're trying to work on modernization for interactive displays and to actually teach young people about the effects of climate change and offer solutions as well. South Boston Community Health Center, as I said before, the town of Hull, the town of Weymouth, the town of the city of Quincy, all with major seawall and climate change resiliency projects. Lastly, I want to end with this. One of the large-scale projects that I think offer a lot of hope in dealing with climate change is a clean energy transmission line called the New England Clean Energy Connect. And I want to thank our partners in Canada. This has been a labor of love for many of us, but I want to just call out Lisa Carrier, who works at the Canadian Consul General's office and is a member here, for the great work that she has done. So the New England Clean Energy Connect is a $1 billion, 145-mile transmission line that will carry clean energy hydropower from Quebec to New England in support Massachusetts' efforts to transition away, in support of Massachusetts' efforts to transition away from carbon-emitting fossil fuels. So we had a dust up in Maine. There were some environmentalists who didn't want us to dig up the ground to put the cable in the ground. And then there were some efforts by some power companies that didn't want the competition. So they felt that the placement of this new transmission line would make them less competitive. However, Avangrid, which is a member of this New England Council, is a subsidiary of Central Maine Power. So we got into a series of lawsuits up in Maine. There was some changes in the project where it now is going to be, the power line is going to be inserted on a service road, which is already there. So it's not spoiling any virgin areas. But that, I think what got us over the top is this is going to be bi-directional. So not only will it bring enough, I think it's like 1,200 megawatts it would bring down to New England, into the Boston area. It would provide power to about 1 million homes. So this is stuff at the scale of which we really do need. But the kicker here is that it's bi-directional. So with the wind projects that we're building offshore, they will ideally, the big changes this will make is that during the summer, when we draw a lot of energy for air conditioning here in and around the city of Boston, we would draw on that hydroelectric power with clean energy for 1 million homes. And then during the winter, when they might need it, we're able to send power to Canada, the wind energy that we will be generating offshore in our area. So there's a benefit to our Canadian neighbors as well. I think it's a great idea. I know I have talked to I think National Grid and Citizens Energy, Joe Kennedy, young Joe Kennedy now as well, have been working on that. And I'll close with this. Democratic leader Hakeem Jeffries appointed me to the new select subcommittee on the weaponization of the federal government. I don't know why he did that. We're good friends. But in any event, so it's an idea that has come up. Jim Jordan, a buddy of mine from Ohio, and so he's heading up this subcommittee. And the idea is that the federal government is interfering with the lives of not only the states but of private citizens. So one of their first actions was to interfere in the state trial against Donald Trump on the part of the district attorney from New York, Southern District of New York. So it is really ironic that they're using the federal power of the federal government to actually go after the district attorney on a case that's been ongoing for a couple of years now. So we've got to deal a little bit with that craziness issue. But I'm happy to hear that 67% of all Americans believe that congressional Republicans should not interfere with the law enforcement investigations of former President Trump that are ongoing in New York. All right, so I do want to leave time for questions. I'm not sure if Mr. Brett is going to moderate that, but look. So I appreciate you. I appreciate the courage that you have to enter into business and to try to help us with our economy. I know sometimes government isn't. Sometimes we obstruct that, and that regulations can sometimes be onerous. So we're always trying to find that sweet spot where we can be encouraging and helpful and facilitate things, and help you do the wonderful work that you do. So I just want you to know on a personal level, my office the doors are always open to try to work with you. We might not always agree, but we can work towards that agreement, right? And I know, I think one of my colleagues is here. Is Amy Cannavale here? She is the new head. I have worked with her for years. She's an attorney with K&L Gates. She worked with me when one of my constituents was killed on the roof of the Benghazi station, and does wonderful work. But she is now the head of the Republican Party in Massachusetts, and I just want to say to her that in these difficult times politically, bipartisanship is at stake, and so I just wanted to say to her, let it begin with us in terms of working together and trying to find solutions that transcend politics, but work to the benefit of the people that we hope to represent. That's all I got. Thank you.
Amy is just a great choice, and active member of the New England Council. And he has awesome responsibility being the chair of the Republican States Committee, representing some 321 registered voters. It's an awesome responsibility. But she's up for it.
My condolences to her, yeah.
Peter Foreman's like laughing down there.
Yeah.
And then you also have the former mayor
Oh,
of Braintree.
yes.
He's probably saying, I didn't get that $3.5 million when I was mayor, but hey,
Oh, no.
you know.
You got plenty, believe
Joe
me.
Sullivan, right here, one of the great mayors of one of the great small towns, I think you once referred to in the Commonwealth. And Congressman is available for a couple of photos following his remarks, and then he's also available to meet with members of the Financial Service Committee upstairs. That will be chaired by Jim Febio, Fidelli, and we thank Jim for his service. But just an example of how much time he gives to his constituents and to New England Council, so we thank him for that. Just a quick question on financial services. Silicon Valley Bank, with the collapse, what is the talk with your colleagues and in your committee? Is there any rumblings about legislation coming forward? Do you think necessary? And your assessment of how the banking industry is doing overall here in New England?
Yeah, great question. Well, let me broaden it out a little bit, though, just so you understand. You know, people say, why do we care about Silicon Valley Bank? It's out there in California. Silicon Valley Bank had the wherewithal and the insight to purchase a local bank here in Boston, First Boston Trust. So that bank had been an active promoter of affordable housing in Massachusetts. And so I think I had 65 separate affordable housing programs that were tied to that original bank that actually their money went over to Silicon Valley Bank. Okay, so now we're at risk. It's not just a problem in California, it's a problem for here in Massachusetts. I think I have 18 projects in my district that were impacted. So that brings it all home. Silicon Valley Bank was a poorly managed bank. They did not have a robust risk management program. I'm not going to go at length on this, but you know, they catered to early startups, and we know from, you know, being a place that welcomes early stage startups, those are highly risky businesses. That's the point at which most of these startups fail, at that early stage. So they had a concentration of those businesses. They also had many crypto-related entities that were there, which those tend to be the most skittish, that if things go bad, they're worried about making payroll and things like that. So that money moves very, very fast. They're also oftentimes funded by venture capital funding, which is also rather skittish, and those venture capitalists tend to, well, in this case, they told their clients to move their money out of Silicon Valley Bank. And with the technology that's available today, that money moved very, very quickly. The mismatch on duration, so Silicon Valley Bank had a lot of T-bills at very low interest rates that were purchased some time ago. And for the last 18 months, you know, Jerome Powell's been telling everybody, I'm going up on interest rates. They did not change their risk profile in terms of their portfolio. So they still had these very low interest T-bills and treasuries, and meanwhile the market is changing, right? And there are far more valuable options for people. So those assets dropped in value. They had long durations on them, and so there was a mismatch in terms of their need for funding. So they got themselves in a very, very bad position because they did not adapt to the changes in the economy, and so you know, the FDIC had to go in and take them over and offer. And they brought in First Citizens Bank out of North Carolina to purchase the assets. They purchased everything except for the crypto because of in my opinion, and what I've seen, I think it was the fear of criminal liability for the custody and import of those crypto assets. So they bought everything but the crypto. So that's a lesson. That's a lesson about risk, that the company coming in to rescue that bank said, we'll buy the bank, but we're not taking any of that crypto. So I hope that's a lesson to us all, especially in the banking community, about the inherent risk there that crypto presents to us. In any event, so we had a hearing, and the chair of the FDIC, as well as the Fed, Treasury, were all there. And because of the risk that we are under here locally, especially with our affordable housing folks, I suggested to Chair Grunberg that he should come to Brockton, Massachusetts, because I have a number of projects that are at risk. So he agreed to do so. So we had a meeting a couple of days ago in my office on Friday, and so he's coming to Brockton, I think, on May 4th, and we're going to meet with some of the affordable housing people and try to work this through. Those obligations will have to be met by First Citizens, and we're going to have some meetings with First Citizens as well. We've done a congressional delegation letter to try to fix that up. In the long term, as far as legislation goes, there has to be some enhanced insurance for banks that do what SVB did, right? If you're going to, we have an FDIC program that works very, very well, instituted after all the bank failures during the Depression, and requires banks to obtain insurance on deposits. And so as a result, you have $250,000 of your deposits that are covered by FDIC insurance. But beyond that, and many companies had tens of millions, Roku, I think, was one of them, had tens of millions of dollars in there that were unprotected. So we have to discourage that type of behavior. But also, we need to figure out a different insurance profile for banks that take that risk, if we're going to allow them to do that. So I think that's one of the things that the Financial Services Committee is looking at right now, to try to figure out a way to provide insurance, but not create a moral hazard where we encourage people to take that type of risk, right? There has to be, I think, a proportionate burden for protecting against that risk, and especially with respect to banks that are going to be crypto-centric. We saw this with Silvergate as well, another bank that was intensely invested in crypto, and they went bust. So we've seen a number of these situations: FTX, Silvergate, SVB, Signature Bank. We've seen a number of other crypto-related firms that have gone out of business because of the innate risk involved in that product. So I guess stay tuned. We've got a markup in financial services this week. I think it's on Thursday. We've got 12 bills coming up. I'm happy to say I think 10 of them are agreed upon, bipartisan, and 2 of them are sort of attacking the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau and the SEC, and we don't agree with that. So that's what's coming up on the agenda this week in Congress.
Is there any talk about FDIC insuring all deposits?
There's a discussion about that. Just as how do you do it, and again, it goes back to the issue of managing risk. Do you even cover all deposits for banks that act in a risky fashion, and how do you manage that? So it's doable. Oddly enough, in Massachusetts, if you're a Massachusetts chartered bank, basically all of your deposits are insured. But obviously that eats into the leverage the bank has, and there's a cost to that. So, SVB offered higher interest rates to lure those companies in to do business with them, and then required them to keep their deposits on hand as a Silicon Valley bank. So it's a little bit more complicated than just waving a wand and saying, okay, we're going to cover all deposits. There's got to be a strategy here that actually pays for itself.
We have time for a couple of questions, and just identify yourself. Yes, ma'am.
Representative Lynch, hi, I'm G. Morse Jones, and I'm chair of the Alzheimer's Association from the Mass New Hampshire chapter. And I'm a constituent, and I want to thank you for your long-standing support for the Alzheimer's Association and people suffering from that disease. And particularly, I want to thank you for co-signing a letter to the head of the CMS about their recent decision to not fund through Medicare the new Alzheimer's treatments that are coming on the market.
Yeah.
And I wanted to ask you, what can we do to help CMS reverse that decision?
Yeah, thank you very much. Thanks for your good work. And, I think all of us have someone in our lives that have been afflicted with Alzheimer's. My own family, my Uncle Snooky, who was cared for very well at the Bedford VA. They have an Alzheimer's unit there. They and your organization was such a blessing to us in a very difficult situation. He was healthy and mobile, and so extremely, all my uncles are difficult to control, but him especially, but thanks for your good work. I think any public letters from, you'd be surprised how powerful personal experience is, even in that rather technical realm. And so I would encourage families to talk about what these various therapies mean to their loved ones. And obviously we think that by incentivizing rather than discouraging experimentation and research in that area, we'll get to a solution sooner rather than later. So it's the voice, and you've got a receptive White House, so I would include them in terms of the president gets it on this issue. So he could be a powerful ally, and I think he will be. So make sure you let him know about what's going on in your life and the lives of the people that you represent. Thank you.
Other questions for the congressman? Now that we have the priority.
Jim, do you have a question?
Jim Smith.
Obviously dying up front, right?
Dying, he's not dying.
Thank you so much for those thoughts and those words on the transgender issue, challenging issue. None of us probably follow the governor of Utah that closely. If you bring those remarks to us, I appreciate that. You can't cover everything, obviously, in a 20-minute presentation. Immigration still baffles me. How hard is it? We're losing population. We have, for the last couple hundred years, done very well in this Commonwealth with immigrants. People want to come. I know you don't have the solution, but can you share some thoughts on what is possible? I know this Congress might not do anything, but what might happen someday in the future to solve what seems to be an issue that really just gotten out of control?
Yeah, I actually took a handful of Republicans down with us. So I went down to El Salvador, Honduras, Guatemala, to try to look at the push factors that people were trying to escape very, very tough situations there. Oddly enough, once we went down there and looked at all that and spent a week together looking at this issue, spent a lot of time at the border, at El Paso and Ciudad Juarez, you get a better feel for it. And I think those Republican members were informed by our collective experience. That much said, I think they would rather have that issue as an issue politically than actually solve it, right? There are certain Republican colleagues, and I don't paint them all with the same brush, especially on this issue, that there are some members who, on the Republican side, who want to find a solution, just like there are, on the Democratic side. I think the commercial interests, the farming interests, agriculture interests realize the value of having a two-way immigration system. We benefit from that here in Massachusetts, where we have people coming up working on the Cape, for the summer, and then go back home. I think the population point is a good one, but until we get, until we have a full debate about the real facts of the issue, I don't think you'll see any change in the near term on this. I think the answer is to try to have a balanced, it can't be all about helping desperate people. I think if you widen that out to include, and it can't be all about, 4 countries in Central America. It has to be a global solution. And it has to be about balancing, obviously we have to be compassionate for families that are desperate, but also we've got to recognize there's a lot of talent out there that would love to come to the United States. I mean, I did a swearing-in ceremony in Helmand province in Afghanistan. 119 men and women in uniform, all with the United States patch on their shoulder, chasing the Taliban up and down the province. All of them immigrants. None of them U.S. citizens. So I swore them in. I swore them in as new citizens over there. 119 of them, most of the Marines, but some Air Force and some Army as well. And I just walked in there. I did not know I was going to be doing this, and they asked me to conduct this whole thing. So, all I can do to come up with it was I quoted JFK. Ask not, what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country. This wasn't even their country, and they were serving the military because they wanted to come here. They wanted to pitch in. They were coming here. They wanted to come here for all the right reasons, not to put their feet up or collect benefits. They put a uniform on. They put a gun on their shoulder, and they were fighting for the principles that we all cherish. So I think there's a way forward, but it's going to take courage. It's going to take courage. I got constituents in my own district that don't think that our approach on our compassion is the right approach here. So we're all going to have a lot of courage and try to move forward together. But Canada is doing a very good job at luring talent to Canada. And they're benefiting from that greatly, much to the chagrin of China and some others who are. Feel like there's a brain drain as people leave, these authoritarian dominated regimes, countries, and move towards freedom. So, and we've got that here. We've got the ability to attract the best and brightest here as well. And I think it would benefit us all in the future to see that.
Another area where immigration is really desperately needed is human services. Whether it's people working in the nursing homes, whether they be working Jim Cassetter and Work Inc., people who have disabilities, ID, DD, but live on their own, people who are in group homes. If you talk to any of these people, they'll say they have a 40-50% vacancy, and what they're looking for is some help, and they look at immigration as an area. I always like to think immigration equals jobs. Yeah. This is a jobs bill. It's not an immigration bill, it's a jobs bill. It's an unmet need, but it's at a crisis situation in the human service area. So
yeah, I know we have a couple more questions. We have one.
Joe Donovan.
Yeah.
And then Jim Siegel will have his question.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Joe Donovan.
Congressman, you touched upon the debt limit. Some people have suggested that maybe we don't necessarily need to have the debt limit, which was a statute that was passed in the First World War to issue bonds. Since 1960, it's been raised rather 78 times. As many of us know, the only time you hear about the debt limit is when the country comes up against it and it needs to be raised. Otherwise, we don't discuss it. Is there merit to having that discussion, given that it's simply used politically to create chaos?
Yeah. Well, the reverse is true. If you didn't have the vote on the debt limit, it'd never come up. And I think there's grave danger in taking that. I think we need to have that painful conversation. I really do. I think we need to be, members of Congress need to be made aware of what they're doing when they vote for funding. I don't think that's a bad thing. I wouldn't, I know there have been similar measures here at the state level where they wanted to have automatic increases or mandatory increases for, I think it was construction, transportation, and some other issues. And they didn't want them to be, subject to debate. Even for, areas like veterans funding, they wanted to make those automatic and didn't want to have debate about them. I think debate is healthy. The dialectic that occurs in arguing for or against certain levels of spending are healthy. I think Congress needs to do more of that. And the value of that debate really accrues to us all by thoughtful debate. And so I do think we need to have that tripwire that reminds us, okay, our debt is at $31.4 trillion, and that's a big number, and we need to try to address that. But I don't think that I don't think the way they're doing it right now, they're trying to. So we've got debt that has already been incurred, and we need to pay for that, and that's a different argument about how we spend money in the future. Those should be two different arguments, especially in situations where you might have a war ongoing in Ukraine, where you're trying to fund that short-term, hopefully short-term situation. You need to separate that from what you've done in the past, and they're trying to blend the two, and I don't think it's healthy. Yeah, but great question, Joe. Thank you.
Jim Siegel.
Thanks, Steve. Your comments are always thoughtful and observations. Can you explain to us how a 21-year-old from Dayton has access to top secret material?
Yeah.
And in the national security jurisdiction, what are you guys planning on doing about that?
Yeah, right. So great question. So I've had classified briefings with everyone involved already. Also had a chance to meet with General Keefe, who's our National Guard general here in Massachusetts. There's no way, oddly enough, so the Massachusetts National Guard has already instituted for newer and younger members of their units. They cannot view classified information alone. They pair up. So if that situation were governed by the Massachusetts Air National Guard, he would have had somebody sitting beside him when he viewed that information if he had to view it. And there was a question as to whether he had to be able to see the information broken out or whether he could move that information in packets. In other words, he would know basically the file, but he would not be able to read the contents of that file because he was an IT specialist and he was supposed to be facilitating the transfer of information. So there's some open questions about whether he should have been able to open that information or whether he should have been given the clearance that he was given with such short time experience within the military. He obviously faces some dire consequences for his actions, not only as a U.S. citizen, but as a member of the military, being subject to the Uniform Code of Justice. He could do life if he gets, an adverse ruling. And there are, Espionage Act, at least 10 years minimum, I think, if he's found guilty there. So we obviously need to tighten things up in a big way. I know there are a lot of suggestions that the opportunity for him was limited. He was only showing it on a Discord site, but and that was somehow a mitigating factor. But I think honestly that this type of sharing of information was going on from the very beginning of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. So I don't think we have all the answers yet. I don't think we understand the full impact of what this young man did. I feel bad for his family, but there has to be consequences for somebody doing something like this. He knowingly did this. He was informed, he was educated, and he knew exactly what he was doing. So, and he knew the consequences. So he's going to have to face them now.
Maybe one final question.
I do want to just say one thing. I know I did not mention gun violence, and the reason is because there's very little chance of us moving a bill, despite the evidence, despite the need that we see each and every single day in this country. But there's no appetite, and we have tried to push various bills. We've got a package of 3 bills that I think are very, very modest in Congress. One would ban anybody who's on the no-fly list from being sold a weapon. You'd think that would be easy, but we've got opposition to that. We've got a bill that would extend the current 3-day FBI clearance. So when you're trying to purchase a weapon now from a licensed dealer, there's so that dealer has to do a background check, but it's the FBI is required to do it in 3 days. And if they don't, then the dealer is instructed to make the sale. So you've got the FBI's under the gun, right? Within 72 hours, they've got to either deny it or it goes forward. The shooting down in South Carolina at the church, they weren't able to. That man should not have been sold a weapon, yet they couldn't do it in 3 days. So the clearance was still pending. The investigation was still pending when the dealer made the sale, because the FBI did not meet the 3-day deadline. So the sale went through. He ended up going down there and killing all those people in the church down in South Carolina. So a perfect example of what we need this for. We're going to extend it 6 days to give the FBI, because there are more and more people buying guns. The sale of guns has picked up. I think, ironically, because of this feeling of insecurity. So we've got several bills that I think, and one bill is regarding large capacity magazines, but we've gotten nowhere with the Republicans. I think they're fearful of the NRA and the consequences, even though I think a lot of even gun owners realize the common sense of those measures. So I didn't want to neglect that issue, but I just don't feel like we have a chance of getting anything moved in the legislature. Yeah.
Do we have one final question? If not, I'll thank the congressman for, again, for thoughtful, insightful remarks. And as I said earlier, he's unique in the sense that, as Brother Mitchell alluded to, he's accessible, he's approachable, he's there to do meaningful legislation to address pressing problems that we have. And yet he has this core burning desire within himself to do what is right for his constituents. And he's never wavered, and he's made some tough votes. But his district absolutely, when he runs for re-election, it's usually, they weigh his votes. They don't count them because they know who he is. He's there for them. And we're lucky to have him. And again, he's always been there for the New England Council, so I can't say enough.
Thanks,
So thank you. Thank you.